Before Europe ever crowned its most powerful queens, African women were already leading armies, conquering cities, and reshaping entire empires. I'm not talking about symbols, not legends. I'm talking about commanders on the battlefield, strategists in the war room. So why have their names been erased from our history books? Today, we're exposing the African women who led armies long before Europe even existed as we know it. Let's uncover the truth. History often tells us that leadership, war, and power were exclusively male domains, but that whole story completely collapses when you look at Africa. Across West, Central, and Southern Africa, women ruled kingdoms, commanded troops from the front lines, and made strategic decisions that shaped centuries of history. Their leadership wasn't an exception in many cultures. It was an expectation. Let's start with one of the most feared and respected military leaders in West African history, a name that should be known worldwide. Meet Queen Amina of Zatzau. She ruled in the 16th century long before European colonial borders were drawn across the continent. Amina wasn't a queen who sat on a throne and issued decrees from afar. She personally led massive military campaigns across Hausaland, expanding Zatzau's influence through brilliant cavalry warfare, iron discipline, and the construction of fortified cities. In fact, the massive earthen city walls known as Ganyuwar Amina's walls still exist in parts of Nigeria today as a testament to her reign. This was not symbolic leadership. Amina trained her soldiers, she planned the attacks, and she enforced control over a vast territory for 34 years. At this time in history, Europe had absolutely no equivalent female military commander who could match her record. She was a conqueror, a builder, and a leader whose legacy was so powerful, it was almost erased. Now, let's move south, to the 17th century. While European powers were expanding their brutal slave trade across the Atlantic, one queen was fighting it with everything she had. Her name was Nzinga, the queen of Dongo and Matamba. She wasn't just a resistor, she was a master strategist. Nzinga employed brilliant guerrilla warfare tactics, shifting political alliances that kept her enemies off balance, and psychological strategies that struck fear into the hearts of the Portuguese colonizers. For over 40 years, she personally led troops in battle and completely reorganized her kingdom into a formidable military state, a bastion of resistance. She would negotiate treaties, and when it served her people, she would betray those same treaties. She adapted, she survived, and she never surrendered her sovereignty. This wasn't desperation. This was pure, unadulterated strategy from one of history's greatest military minds. Fast forward to the turn of the 20th century, to the year 1900. The powerful Ashanti Empire is under threat. British colonial forces have demanded the ultimate symbol of the Ashanti people as soul and sovereignty, the sacred golden stool. In a great assembly, the male chiefs and leaders hesitated, debating whether to surrender or fight a hopeless war. But one woman did not hesitate. Her name was Yaa Asantewaa, the Queen Mother. She rose and delivered a speech that would ignite a rebellion. She shamed the men for their cowardice and declared that if they would not fight, the women would. She rallied the chiefs, organized a fierce resistance, and personally led the Ashanti in their final, defiant war against British colonial control. Her words alone sparked the uprising. Her leadership forced the British Army into months of brutal siege warfare. Yaa Asantewaa proved that true power isn't granted by an oppressor, it is claimed by the brave. But this tradition of warrior queens goes back even further, to antiquity. Centuries before Amina or Nzinga, the Kandake queens of Kush ruled a mighty empire in what is now Sudan. These queens, known to the Greco-Romans as the Candaces, were not just rulers. They were supreme military commanders. They commanded powerful armies, negotiated treaties as equals with world powers, and even defeated Roman legions in battle. Roman historians themselves wrote about the Kandakes not as myths or exotic tales but as serious military threats. One Kandake, Alma-Nerinas, waged war against the Roman Empire under Emperor Augustus and fought them so fiercely that Rome was forced to sue for a peace treaty on her terms. Granting Kush favorable conditions and withdrawing from its territory, they challenged the most Powerful empire on earth and one. So if these women were so powerful, so influential, where did they go? Why aren't their names taught alongside Alexander the Great or Queen Elizabeth I? The truth is, they didn't just disappear. Their legacies were intentionally hidden. First, colonial narratives actively dismissed African systems of governance to justify their own rule. They couldn't admit that sophisticated states led by powerful women existed. Second, European historians, mostly men, simply ignored or downplayed the role of female power in the histories they wrote, projecting their own societal norms onto Africa. Their absence from our history books is intentional, not accidental. African women didn't wait for permission to lead. They didn't ask for a seat at the table. They built the table. They forged crowns, commanded armies, and built power in a world that demanded nothing less than absolute strength. Subscribe for more untold stories of African empires, forgotten warriors, and brilliant civilizations, the real history that your school never taught. Thanks for watching.